No, I do think I'm interrupted.
Okay, let's start. The lights are very bright. No one said that before. Okay, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining this important discussion on building just transition and safeguarding labor rights in the projects financed by the ADB. Before we begin, I want to remind everyone that this is a safe and respectful space. Please seek permission before taking any photos, and some participants and speakers may not want to be photographed. And then also, as with the rest of the events, we will be using Pigeonhole. You can take a picture of it for a Q&A. I'm not going to explain how it works because I think we've got it by now. And I will also open the floor for questions in person at the end of the Q&A. My name is Linnea Wikström. I'm the Director for Construction and Health and Safety at the Global Union Federation Building and Woodworkers International. And today we will hear from trade unionists and the ADB management on how ADB and trade unions can partner to ensure a just transition that puts people at the center. So before we have the distinguished panel, I've been also asked to set the scene. As we are confronted with a dual crisis of climate change and economic inequality, nowhere is the urgency greater than in Asia, where infrastructure and energy projects are reshaping the entire economies and labor markets. The ADB plays a central role in this transformation. But the critical question is, who builds that future, under what conditions, and for whose benefit? A just transition is not simply about going green. It's about ensuring that workers, those building and powering the transition, are protected and respected and empowered. And we must remember, workers are not only victims of climate change, they are part of the solution. From forests in Indonesia to construction sites in Tajikistan, India, and Philippines, workers are already adapting and contributing to sustainable development with strength, resilience, and determination. BWI represents 12 million workers around in the construction, wood, forestry, and allied sectors. Through our affiliates in Asia, we've seen firsthand the conditions on large-scale infrastructure and energy projects, many financed by the ADB. The risk to workers are systematic and urgent. OSH violations are widespread. Workers face hazardous conditions, injuries and fatalities due to weak enforcement, tight deadlines and complex subcontracting chains. Labor exploitation is endemic, especially among informal workers who endure low wages, long hours, no job security, and no access to social protection. Freedom of association is often denied. Workers trying to organize face intimidation, retaliation, and blacklisting. And subcontracting masks accountability, making it difficult to enforce labor standards when responsibilities are passed down opaque chains. And now climate change itself has become a health and safety crisis. Workers are facing extreme heat, worsening air quality, and rising disease risks. This isn't theoretical, it's happening on work sites today. Adapting is no longer optional, it's a matter of survival. For BWI, a just transition must be grounded in labor and human rights. It must ensure that no workers is left behind in this name of climate action and economic growth. We believe ADB finance projects must include formal engagement with trade unions, from project planning to implementation, protection of ILO core labor rights through effective safeguard implementation, enforceable labor clauses and mandatory OSH standards in contracts and throughout the supply chain, robust monitoring, including joint inspections with unions and independent labor audits, strong health and safety standards to address climate risks like heat protection, water and rest breaks, early warning systems, and clear rights to stop unsafe work without penalties. And skills training and reskilling programs that prepare workers for the green jobs while ensuring that decent work conditions take place. ADB safeguard policies are core at this, but its financing could also play a key role by promoting training and apprenticeship programs that are publicly funded or tied to project implementation, developed in partnership with unions and inclusive, especially for youth, women, and workers in risk sectors. It's not just about creating jobs, but about creating good and sustainable jobs that people want and deserve. So, what's the signs of progress? The good news is we are taking critical steps in the right direction. In 2024, ADB launched its new labor safeguards requirements, a major step towards embedding respect for labor rights in all ADB finance projects. These safeguards have the potential to directly address the systematic risks I've just outlined, but I'll also leave it to Bruce to share more about it shortly. Also worth highlighting is in 2023, BWI and ADB signed a historic memorandum of understanding, a practical and action-focused commitment to improving labor conditions in ADB finance projects. This MOU is not just symbolic. It's a platform for real collaboration and transparency and impact. These developments offer both opportunity and responsibility. Now we must ensure that this new framework is fully implemented and that it's done with workers and not just for them. And just transition means more than building green infrastructure. It means building fair and inclusive that protects and empowers workers in every step. And with that, I'm honored to invite our distinguished panel to the stage. Together, we will explore how we can close the gap between policy and practice and make ADB finance development a global benchmark for labor justice and sustainability. So with that, can I welcome up Priyanta Via, of your last name, a Senior Director for Energy Sectors Department at ADB that will describe, please, how just transition principles are considered in the ADB and energy sector policies. Mr. Rexon Silaban, Head of the International Advisors at KSBSI, Indonesian Trade Union Federation, that will present the trade union position paper related to ADB energy transition mechanisms. Mr. Francis Kim Ukki, Director of Economic and Social Policy at ITUC Asia Pacific, who will speak about the necessary factors about the just transition with the growing challenges in managing risks on labor and human rights. Ms. Shaguf Barias, Project Coordinator at Building and Woodworkers International, South Asia office, who will speak about challenges faced by workers on the project level. Mr. Bruce Dunn, the Director of Policy and Technical Services at the Office of Safeguards for ADB, who will speak about the process of rolling out the ADB's new safeguard policies. And last but not least, Matt Murphy, Assistant National Secretary at the Electrical Trade Union of Australia, who will present the trade union perspective of how investments in the energy transition can be done in the benefits it can have for workers. And I also just want to make one note that Mr. Priyanta will have to leave, so we will start with you. But he is we're appreciative that you made the time to begin with. So with that, we will start.
Thank you very much. Sorry that I have to leave a bit early because we have some other function to attend, and hope I'm not taking away what Bruce is going to say, because I have to cover more or less what we are doing as ADB and energy sector in particular. Therefore, there will be obviously some overlap. I don't have to redefine what just energy transition is all about, because it's already told, and you in the audience know that very well. As far as ADB is concerned, ADB's approach to enable a just transition in Asia and the Pacific is anchored in 4 important key strategies. 1, developing an operational approach to mainstream a just transition in ADB's operations, policies, and strategies. This approach is based on internal and external consultations and dialogue, as well as 5 high-level principles for MDB support on a just transition, which ADB has committed to in 2021. The second, mobilizing resources to support just transition initiatives in the region. And since COP27, we have been mobilizing resources to help just transition in all areas of interventions we have, and in particular in the energy sector, because energy sector is the key. In that, we have put in our own resources and resources from clean investment funds and also from philanthropies. And that's the second strategy we have. And of course, it's a key pillar in our flagship energy transition mechanism, and that's embedded in that approach. And the third is providing knowledge, leading innovations, and strengthening collaborations with other stakeholders and development partners. That's the fourth strategy we have. Then obviously, the last but not least is building ADB's institutional capacity. Within the institution, we need to build capacity in this regard, and harmonizing efforts to deliver and support a just transition for its DMCs. This is very much important if we want to work with our DMCs. And coming down to giving an example how we really do that in specific projects. And obviously, ADB has been long committed fostering sustainable development and enhancing quality of life of people in its member countries. And in recent years, we have been taking even extra emphasis on voices of workers in our projects. And by the way, I am heading along with Bruce, what we call solar PV supply subcommittee, where we look at issues in solar PV supply, additional due diligence requirements in solar PV supply chain. We might extend that to even wind and batteries and all sorts of other things, simply because we are interested in looking at this very, very closely. And where projects as part of the ownership, transfer, and privatization involve significant modernization of existing processes and facilities, including decarbonization of large-scale industrial facilities, this may result in need to restructure the workforce. In such cases, prior to considering financing, we are expected to review how the borrower and the clients engage with workers and existing work organizations, accounts for their views, interests, and the needs. And in fact, particularly when it comes to policy-based loans in the energy sector, we have power sector reforms, for instance. We have restructuring, unbundling, where workers are impacted, and we always make sure that we consult these workers and get their views on board when it comes to moving ahead with some of these structural reforms which impact obviously the workers, and that may involve sometimes get these workers in reskilling, upskilling, and all that may be involved. And furthermore, as part of our consultations, workers may raise health and safety standards and concerns, and not only the workers within these institutions whom we directly deal with, but also the contractors and suppliers may have workers who may have issues, and we may be able to bring these requirements into the bid documents and the contracts and the agreements which we have with these suppliers, so that they adhere to what we can expect, as far as the health and safety standards are concerned. So these are some of the areas where we are really keen. We are really emphasizing on, and also put a lot of efforts to bring that such requirements into energy projects. In fact, the design of ADB energy projects often incorporates specific features aimed at enhancing worker welfare. These features are frequently the result of direct input from workers during the consultation process. For example, in several hydropower projects, workers emphasize the importance of providing adequate housing and healthcare facilities for those involved in the construction and operation of the project. In response, ADB included provisions for worker housing, medical clinics, schools, and recreational facilities in the project design. Obviously, the borough will have to put in money for that, but we bring in all that into the conditions of the loan, so that borough will spend money on those requirements. So these are some of the ways we handle these issues, and obviously we can strengthen it in consultation with people like you and all the others in the panel. With that, I'll stop here. I may have to leave now, if you don't mind. And any questions, please direct to Bruce. Thank you. Thanks, Bruce.
So, I wonder if I should jump one step so that I don't distance myself too far from it. We do like that. Okay. If anyone else want to stand up, just tell me. Otherwise, and if we can ask some questions, it would be great. But it was very helpful to get that introduction from Mr. Prianta. I want to turn to you, Rexon, because you've been very involved in discussing these climate targets and actions in Indonesia. So how would you see they compare to the global and regional commitments, and how can trade unions meaningfully involve themselves in shaping and designing and monitoring the large-scale climate finance mechanisms like the ETM and GTP?
Yes, thank you, moderator. Frankly, it's not always bad news, but we have to acknowledge the Indonesian government made some good progress. International commitment, everything international they just signed, that is shown their commitment globally. But the current target Indonesian on the Paris Declaration is off target. So there is always the scapegoat because the financing problem. Because even JP, who promised will give Indonesia $20 billion, still less than $1 billion has been released. So still the financing issues very big problem. But for me, the real problem is the unclear Indonesian policy on what they want to do, because there are some contradiction. For instance, they are not able to reach the renewable energy target. Also, they continue to explore coal and mining. Yeah, it's not a surrender. They keep increasing, because there is problem for the international calculation of the emission. We have to discuss about this. If the coal is export, it's not coal as the emission. Only coal if they use domestically in Indonesia. So there is international calculation on the emission. They calculate the emission. So Indonesia is continuing to explore the coal mining, and then they set up the target to 0.60. But I'm not sure if the situation globally, geopolitical tension still worsen, there will be a temptation to put that in to 0.70 to 0.80. And then the second one is about the conflicting of the the Indonesian target to have the food security, to planting the food, but have to the deforestation, destroying the forest. So they said, why have to destroy the forest? No, we have the 40 million forest. Why not sacrifice 2 million to have food security? Yeah, so this is it's not easy issue in the country. The third, this is the most important thing as the trade union. The social dialogues, let's say, is only kind of pro forma. There is no meaningful social dialogue because it's not clear when we going to start to talk. Yeah, JP already have the design and comprehensive investment plan, and then they come to us with the 300 pages. So give the comment, or the Indonesia next 5 years 300 pages. How come you can comment? And then who will go in partner to involve? Because they don't see trade union as the main partner. They prefer the NGO, for instance. Their own NGO. And then that's why we call there should be Indonesian National Transition Body, the place we talk about the directive, Indonesia directive for the future, and Indonesian we initiated in December. Finally, we decided all trade union, major trade union, set up national transition, national trade union position paper on just transition. So you already have. So Indonesia now, the trade union only one voice, 6 demand. Include we use the ADB safeguard before, as they inspire also the ILO guideline on the just transition.
And when you develop this paper, this position, what safeguards did you present that is needed to make sure that the energy transition investments also support decent work? Because that's always the priority for the trade unions, and not just the carbon targets, because they go hand in hand. But what did you really push for when it comes to decent work and just transition?
First, the principle should be the people center. The most affected, the first affected in the phase out is the workers and the local community and the region. So this should be, if you want to have project people center, they should thinking the affected target project, this one. They should have scenario what model the social protection for trade union, or the kind of project livelihood to the local community will be disappear from their economic activities, and also some region who depend on 40% of the income from the coal. So they are rejecting. If there is no compensation from the national government, they don't participate. So something that they should have to solve this. But unfortunately, JP is the people say it will be one of the model financing of the climate change. They don't have any specific budget to those affected persons, the local community workers and regional government. So we told them, without people support, the project of the just transition will be failed, because they put this transition in their document, but they have their own translation of this just transition. That's why we need to define Indonesian just transition through establishing national tripartite or national body on just transition. So the place we have discussed the issue, and then the principle, everything. So if the ADB already have the safeguard 10, actually we don't take all, we just take 6, skilling, training, relocation, and other things. But at least we can use now as the model of our advocacy to say why we're not using this ADB or the ILO safeguard, something like that. Thank you.
Thank you. That's very insightful. And if we take it to a bit regional perspective, I turn to you, Francis. From your perspective, could you identify some mega trends, more regionals, and the most critical elements that require to ensure just transition is truly realized under the bank's new safeguards?
Thank you, Rinya. My intervention, many parts actually covered by your speech intervention, but I would like to touch upon first the ITUC International Trade Union Confederation. We represent 191 million workers, and ITUC Asia Pacific we represent 60 million workers from the 34 countries in Asia Pacific region. Let me touch upon the poverty and inequality. Yes, so poverty in monetary and also in non-monetary terms is rising for the first time after decades of the poverty reduction, and also inequality in terms of income, wealth, and opportunity is widening. And maybe we can identify the democratic shifts and climate change and digitalization as global and regional mega trends, like UNSCAP actually did. And without proper measures, for example, with inadequate social protection to leave the half of the regional population with no protection, this negative consequence of the global megatrend would deepen poverty, vulnerability, and inequality, which are the real threats to the prosperous, sustainable, inclusive, resilient Asia and the Pacific, which the ADB aim to realize. This megatrend has a significant implication in the world of work, so that there is also the significant negative impacts on the economic development. For example, the democratic shift towards the increase of the aged or aging population, in particular in developed country, have made older person staying in the labor market longer. And we know the old worker has more vulnerable to the industrial accident and diseases. And also on the contrary, low and low middle income countries have a high proportion of young people, but with a high level of youth in non-employment, education, and training. And labor migration and gender inequality in the world of work also considered under the democratic dynamics. Digitalization and climate change, Liana already mentioned, in particular the digitalization, expansion of AI, and the digital management tool in the workplace is intensifying works, increasing stresses, and weakening human oversight. This shift are creating new form of occupational health and safety hazard and impact, which are often invisible and underreported. The just transition that I refer to today here is not only just against climate change, but also for any transformation under the global and regional mega trends toward decent work, with the 4 pillars: rights, quality employment creation, and social protection and social dialogue. For just transition toward the decent work, there are key policy areas such as macroeconomic policy, industrial policy, skill development, and human trade union rights, and social dialogue, etc. But in particular, I would like to highlight the human and trade union rights and social dialogue and tripartism here in relation to the new environmental social framework by the ADB. In particular, the ESS1, assessment and management of the environmental and social risk and impact, ESS2 on labor and working condition, ESS4 health, safety and security, and ESS10 stakeholder engagement and information disclosure. I have some points with concern and to be highlighted here. First, the new ESF, there is no direct reference to the ILO Fundamental Convention. However, we must note that in accordance with the Declaration of the Fundamental Principle and Right at Work, which all ILO member states are obliged to comply. So this one give a ground for this application of all the fundamental ILO convention. And also, I would like to highlight in this regard, paragraph 13 of the ESP, Environmental Social Policy, and paragraph 11 of the ESS1 says that the compliance with the host country's applicable law, including those law implementing the host country's obligation under international instrument. But I would like to see the direct reference to the ILO Fundamental Convention in the guidance note. And also, I would like to highlight that in relation to ESF, I want to see the guidance note specifically refer to other ILO conventions, such as our Convention 190 on violence and harassment, and Convention number 1 and 30 on working hours, and Convention 195 on protection of wages, and Convention 158 on termination of employment. Second point is about the national environmental social system. In accordance with the ESF, it actually has a condition of the material consistency. But I would like to highlight, according to the ITUC Global Rights Index 2024, in the ILO Global Rights Index, 3 out of 10 worst countries in terms of violation of the human and labor rights are from the AP region. And then as a whole, Asia Pacific region is the second worst region in terms of violation of the human and labor rights. So, of course, you are going to check standard by standard, comparing with the national system, but just the regulation, existence of the regulation doesn't mention that the practice on the grassroots. And in this regard, I would like to highlight this, in particular, the implementation of the paragraph 14 of the ESP, that where requirement of the host country's applicable law differ from ESS requirements, ADB will require a borrower client to achieve or implement whichever is more stringent or protective for the project affected person and or environment. So I just would like to highlight this provision. And last but not least, I also would like to congratulate you to include the ban of all types of asbestos in the prohibited investment activity list. And also we need to see that the list from the number 1 to 4 actually related to the energy transition. So yeah, I just want to highlight this 2 points in the ESF related to the just transition.
Thank you. That was very thorough. And I was going to have a second question for you, but maybe I'll pause that for a bit and then we come back to you. So we make sure that everyone is, has some time. I think we've tried to come from a national perspective, regional perspective, and I'm now turning to a project level perspective. Shagufta, could you describe the experiences of our affiliates in Pakistan and at the project level, and how that reflects maybe what is the challenges, but also what is the maybe future, what we need. So I will come with this future part as the second part of the question. So maybe you can just set the scene a bit.
Yeah, okay. So before I just begin, I would like to mention that Brother Aslam Adil, who is the General Secretary of Pakistan Federation of Building and Woodworkers, he, due to some visa issues, couldn't be here with us today. And he is a long-standing trade unionist and a widely respected one in the Pakistan region, and also the affiliate of BWI. So on behalf of PFBWW and BWI, I would be representing him. And since I work with BWI and also has a close working relationship with PFBWW, would like to highlight the issues and concerns for the attention of ADB and its mechanisms. As you are also quite aware about the investments that have been increased in the Pakistan region, in the hydropower potential and need for the clean renewable energy sources to meet its growing energy demands. So there has been investment through various IFIs in the region, and most of the projects have involvement of Chinese MNCs. And PFBWW has been organizing at many of the projects that are usually hydropower projects. And notable among these are the Tarbela Dam project that is funded by the World Bank, and Karoth hydropower project, Suki Kinari Dam project, Mohammed Dam project, and the Balakot hydropower project. And PFBWW has a trade union membership of 33,500 members across the region. It is also recognized as a collective bargaining agent by the government at selected IFI sites. And especially today, I would like just not to mention about the concerns, but also looking forward to develop a time-bound resolution plan by the ADB in place with the country office, including the contractors, subcontractors, the management, the engineers, and also the implementing agencies in the region. And regarding the Balakot hydropower project, it is included in the current country operations business plan and also supports the ADB strategy of 2030. So the PFBWW has its organizing presence and also a site level union at the Balakot Dam project, which is the INSAF labor union. And it has a membership of around 1,100 workers, among which 700 workers are from the Balakot site. And before I just outline the project concerns, I would also like to put on record that ADB has been working with us proactively, and it has also conducted visits, inspections, and in the South Asia region, also joint missions in the Nepal hydropower project, and also at Bangladesh, the metro rail project. Though there are various issues that needs to be mentioned, as PFBWW has reported, unsafe working conditions and also OHS violations in the region, in the Balakot Dam project specifically. The union members have been denied entries to meet the workers at the site. There has been victimization of union officials and members. There has been lack of decent working and living conditions, and also other anti-union tactics have been made by the management. In fact, the site level union has been recognized as a collective bargaining agent by the government, but it has not been honored by the management. It is required to note that the union has been involved with the ADB, but during the recent missions that were conducted by ADB in January and April this year, the union was not invited, and the management of the Balakot hydropower project has been indulging in violations and also unfair labor practices, and has been terminating the union members to weaken the trade union over there. Further, the site level union also reported that no appointment letters were provided to the workers that reflected the terms and conditions of the services of employees, which is also again a violation of the national labor laws as well. And just to say, but this is not the first time that we have been witnessing this experience, because this kind of situation we had also seen in the Karoth hydropower project. We even have a conclusion from last year's ILO's CFA, Committee on Freedom of Association. It issued a clear statement in support of the union, and called on the government to ensure that the trade union rights are respected in future projects. And we believe that the ADB should consider this call in its engagement with the government, since it's a similar situation in the Balakot Hydro Power Project. And the union has been consistently raising concerns about both the victimization of the trade union leaders and also unsafe working conditions. And we also highlight that the absence of a robust OSH mechanism has contributed to a fatal accident last year in December. After the accident, the ADB safeguards team have been working actively with us to address the issues. And at the site, they have continuously maintained communication with us. But it remains that the incident underscores the importance of active trade union representation and the need to take workers' concern seriously so that such incidents or accidents can be prevented in the future.
Thank you very much. And I think it's very important to show that this is the realities on the ground, but also that is something that we progressively try to address. So I will just give you the floor again shortly to show what could be the solution, because that's always where we try to go. We don't raise issues just to raise issues. So what kind of grievance mechanisms or early warning systems could help address risks at a project level like this, from your perspective? Sorry, Francis.
Okay, so I think there are some suggestions that we could propose because we have experience. Firstly, there should be an effective grievance mechanism that needs to be put in place. Because as a good practice, we have seen in the case of World Bank funded Tarbela Dam, it's a hydropower project, and there is a proper GRC, a grievance redress committee that has been established there, and it regularly takes up issues with the unions, and we have monthly meetings along with the management, and the unions are invited, and there are certain cases, certain issues we can raise and resolve them along with the GRC. So it is a well-placed and effective mechanism that has helped us yield good results. Also, I think in the case of Balakot, the main thing that is lacking is there is no such mechanism in place. So first of all, we need to effectively have mechanisms at the site level. And along with adopting such practices, it is also important that the trade unions representation is there, because the importance of social dialogue is required, and it is required that the trade unions are recognized as important stakeholders, along with the management and the employers, of course. Apart from this, we cannot deny that the labor issues are inevitable in such kind of infrastructure projects, but it is essential to have an effective mechanism that is in place to ensure continuous dialogue and guarantee workers' rights, and also to represent that the representation is respected, and to actively manage the project level challenges. I think since the workers' right to representation is just not required just for the sake of having them on board, but it is also important that we establish an occupational OSH committee, Occupational Safety and Health Committee, so with equal representation of the trade unions, so that we are there with the ILO standards, and we have a respectable representation as relevant stakeholders. And beyond such mechanisms, I think proactive engagement is very much required. It is really crucial. And workers' representation should be integrated from the project planning till the implementation phase, so that the trade union representation earlier in the project allows us to mitigate the risks and do the risk management and take the risk mitigation measures. And also, I think when the contractors see that the IFIs invite unions as active partners, it sends a strong signal to them as well that the labor rights are considered important and that cannot be sidelined, and that is a requirement for the project's sustainable point of view.
Thank you very much, Shagufta. I switched the order a bit so Bruce doesn't have to answer to everything in the end, but we will come with some positives in the end as well and the suggestions. But Bruce, I think, as I mentioned in the opening, you've done a huge job the last 2 years. It almost took 3 years to get the new safeguard policy in place, and really with the objective of, with all of these conditions, having a mechanism, a policy to address it. But a policy is always good. The big question is, how do you enforce them consistently? Across the operations of the bank, it's a vast project to get it out. So how is ADB preparing the staff and its clients to implement the new safeguards effectively? And across different project contexts, because we heard here from the previous speakers, this very complex context that you're operating in. So maybe we can start there.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Linnea, and thank you for putting this session on, and really appreciate the leadership with BWI for this session, and appreciate for myself and also Priyanth for joining today. Obviously, the issues that we're talking about today around protecting workers' rights, obviously it's a huge priority. The challenges that we're facing in the region around just energy transition, addressing climate change, while also, simultaneously we need to ensure social inclusion. We need to bring these issues together with workers' rights as well. The energy transition cannot come at the expense of local people. We've been hearing a lot about that from civil society organisations in the last couple of days, and of course with workers, that's absolutely fundamental. So we really appreciate the opportunity of being here and listening. And in fact, the partnership that we've developed, I felt a couple of years ago as we were starting the policy dialogue that, we were talking to each other, but not necessarily always talking with each other or in depth. And I felt we needed to build these partnerships. And of course, the MOU that we have with BWI is fundamental. And of course, with other colleagues here as well, we'd like to strengthen and deepen that. So thank you again for the opportunity. Now, you've asked me a question about how we implementing. If I can just take very briefly a moment for some that may not be familiar, just a couple of the things that we have done with the new policy. We were upstairs just an hour or so ago doing a launch of the policy that was approved by the board last November. I'll just outline very quickly a few key features. So we have a set of environmental and social standards. And the ones I'll just focus in on, some of the ones that are clearly relevant for labour. Standard 2, labour and working conditions. Standard 4, also health, safety and security, so linking into the OSH aspects there, but also some cross-cutting elements, including around stakeholder engagement and grievance mechanisms, which we've heard clearly Shagufta mention the importance of those. Now, not enough time now to go through all of the details, but a few key features. So obviously looking at conditions of work and contracts are absolutely fundamental. And I think ADB has been looking at labour standards. We've had a social protection strategy since 2009, but we didn't have that embedded into our environmental and social framework. And then that meant while there were conditions there, the sort of proactive work around assessing labour risks, around really doing labour management plans and embedding this really fundamentally certainly needed to be stepped up. So that's there, freedom of association and collective bargaining, also looking at child labour and forced labour, that's fundamental. We've also included the OSH requirements are there in the other standard, but that's also been broadened to look at things like sexual exploitation, abuse and harassment. That's clearly an issue in the workplace. We have also included looking at how we
we track incidents, what we were finding was that, we had the requirements in place. And I have to be honest, I came to civil society sessions here in the past where civil society have raised, these health and safety issues on projects, but we had not received that monitoring and reports coming directly from the clients that we were working with. So that has changed in the new policy. There is a clear requirement for mandatory reporting, and that will allow us to track, respond, but also look at trends over time. What are the issues we're seeing? What sectors, what countries? How do we take action on those? So there's a range of provisions that are in there. Big job now is the implementation. And again, you're here also pushing us and keeping us honest to do that. So what are the next steps? Training is key. We're starting with our own staff. That's the big one now. We've been building up. Heidi, she's actually just stepped out. Heidi Irdepuy, many of you know she's leading our NGO and Civil Society Centre, but previously she was our one labour specialist in ADB for several years. We've now built up a team, and that team is working on building our internal staff capacity for the rollout. But we have to go beyond that. We've heard about countries, most countries have already endorsed or ratified ILO conventions. They've got laws on the books, but not necessarily well implemented. Capacity is not there, the monitoring is not there, the labour inspectorates are not there. So I think part of being a development organisation is also our commitment to work on strengthening those country systems. So we've been already in the field. We're talking about Pakistan, and I think we'll come back to have a chance to talk about some more in-depth issues. But while our team was recently in the field looking at some of the issues on projects, we also took the advantage of doing training on labour and working conditions at the project site, involving workers and also project contractors, but also back in Islamabad with government as well. And I think that's fundamental. And I would like to get deeper into that in terms of, policy reform and really building capacity. And I think that's where we can work together as partners. You have knowledge and expertise. We also have some convening power. Bringing that together, I think, could be really beneficial. So I guess I'll stop there for time, but happy to come back on other points. Thank you.
I think it's for the first time. We're quite good on time, so I'm happy because I have many, many more questions, so we don't worry about it. I just want to do one small follow-up because you mentioned it, but maybe specifically on accountability and oversight. What role do you see trade union having there? Because often people just think of trade unions as the people raising complaints, but we don't see it as it's just a complaint. It's actually monitoring the implementation. So how do you see we can work together on that specifically?
Right. Well, yeah, great question. I think we have to recognise that the fundamental principles around freedom of association and collective bargaining mean that, you have a role. And that is something that, of course, now we have this new environmental and social standards in place. We really want to, push course conditions and recognition of that and the role that the trade unions play, or the ability of workers to have, that collective voice is not always recognised. We have to work in those challenging contexts, and we're setting up something now within the policy team around doing contextual analysis, and that's really understanding those dynamics down in the field, and actually to make a call out as well. We're wanting to work with the ILO, the UN High Commissioner on Human Rights to really get data and information around those contexts. Where is it going to be challenging to achieve that in the field? But I think also you play a role in this as well. So, working together there. I think also some of the partnership that we've had already, as you've mentioned, and Shagufta also mentioned, we have been doing some project reviews or inspections together. I think that's really important. But there are other things that we can be doing. The capacity building and training. You bring the voice of the real issues of the workers on the ground, and that has to feed into the types of issues that we actually have to be focusing on for the training, but also the expertise. And there are many existing issues. And Matt, you coming from the electricity industry, we've got issues in different sectors. And we've got these emerging issues like heat stress with climate inducing more and more problems. So I think there's a lot of base. I see what we're doing today is the start, but I'd like to do more together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bruce. And a good segue over to Matt. Just turning back a bit to the just transition and all of these investments in energy which also is your key issue as an electrician. Based on the Australian experience, what risks do you see on labour conditions during a rapid green investment? And how can energy transitions investment be designed to benefit and mitigate these risks for workers? So benefit for workers and mitigate the risks.
Thanks, Linnea, and thanks, Bruce, following you, I suppose. And also thanks to the ADB for putting this on and the invite, and particularly getting us involved. Linnea is something we're very, very grateful for. Just some context, I suppose. In Australia, we require 32,000 more electrical workers before 2030 and 85,000 by 2050 to satisfy the current federal government's rewiring the nation. We can't do that without overseas labour, and we can't do it without 50% of the workforce, that is females, coming into the industry as well. It's a massive task in front of us, and it is all new. I mean, we haven't done this since the Snowy Mountain Scheme in the 1950s after the Second World War, and that was largely done by imported labour from particularly places like Italy and Yugoslavia and Greece, or Yugoslavia at the time. A little bit more context in the Australian context. We face a lot of difficulties with the clients, the builders of the projects and their subcontractors. It's been a pretty difficult time for us. I myself have been subject to death threats, and we've had police called on us when we've got a fairly good legislative and regulatory regime in Australia, in theory and in policy sense. But when you actually try and exercise that, I've been in situations where police have been called on us, and we've had to have those arguments with the police and the employer or the project principal, and without any exception, the police have always come down on our side because we've had our ducks in a row. We've actually had our paperwork done correctly, which has been pretty important. And even after the police have then said no, the ETU's on site, it's there under its OH&S obligations and rights. The police have then left, and we've gone right back to the beginning, and the employer still refuses to give us access. It's not as if there haven't been incidents on that particular job that I'm talking about of a OH&S nature. So the risks for us are that many of these projects are in remote areas. A lot of them are away from where people are prepared to put the resources in to enforce our policy arrangements is one of the issues. And because it's out fairly remote, you've got issues of mistreatment and maltreatment of workers, exploitation, violence, and the effort to try and remove the union and its members off site. The risks also are associated with minimum labour standards and also misclassification or not having adequately qualified workers to do the work, let alone some of the contractors that do this. I suppose there's 2 points. One is with investment, those that are providing the funding need to be assured that the people accessing the funding can actually complete the construction competently and safely. That's the first thing. What we've also had in Australia is contractors bringing in foreign labour under our overseas skilled labour migration arrangements, attracting them on one, what we call trade classification of the line worker, and agreeing to bring them out with government in a migration agreement with government to bring them out as line workers. But actually when they get here, then reclassify them at a lower rate of pay at $10 an hour less as riggers, for example. And that's pretty much rorting the system in our view. They're The other risk, I suppose, is apprentices. And I've heard a lot said over the last couple of days about apprentices and the skills dividend, and particularly in local communities. It is so fundamentally important that these projects have arrangements for apprentices and trainees, and for them to be given a qualification at the end. Because some of the things I've also heard last couple of days is this micro-credentialing nonsense. That's certainly that's value in some vocations, but for trade-based people in remote locations, the ability to move locations and sell your skills is important to have a full and adequate qualification. So, each project needs to have apprentices so that there's people to build the follow-on project, and actually getting a pipeline of infrastructure work in a nation is fundamentally important. But having people there being trained and qualified gives you the ability to keep rolling that process on, that infrastructure pipeline, and keep maintaining those things. So the apprentice and the trainee thing is critically important. There's also a scope for what, and I don't like the term, but it's adequate, mentoring and pastoral care, especially for overseas workers or people who are working outside their regional area, for example. They need a bit of advice as to services they can access, the assistance they can access, someone to talk to from time to time. But just getting a bit of an idea about the ground truth is important. Having the capacity to people to explain that to workers in uncertain circumstances is very, very important. And it's equally important for trade training as well. If people are struggling with the training and assimilating the knowledge, then the mentoring aspect comes in. But just finish on this point, having dealt with the risks. Well, there's 2 points I'd like to make in conclusion. Notwithstanding, I think Linnea's got a few extra questions for me. Fundamentally, I hear the term partnership used a lot. But what we've got to get to is, before we move forward on these matters, fundamentally we have to establish a principle. Sure, there is plenty of capital out there, and there are conditions on the capital. But what capital has to recognise is that what workers hold in these and here, the workers own that. Employers can rent that for a few hours a day, that's fine, but ultimately the worker owns what's up here and in their hands. And that needs to be recognised. And if there's going to be a partnership between capital and labour, that's where it has to happen. And if we're going to move away from the old ideologies towards this partnership thing, that's the fundamental basis that we need to move forward from. That capital recognises that labour has a right to be at the table, owns their skills and knowledge, and is recognised and respected as such. Once we have that, we can move forward. The final point I'll make is I congratulate the ADB on its policy positions and where the improvements it's made over recent years, and particularly on the efforts of the ITUC and the BWI. But it's actually enforcement. Having policies, having a legislative framework, having a regulatory framework are all important things. And having provisions, that's all great. But you've got to be able to enforce it and deliver it on the ground. Now, no one else can do that except unions as an independent voice. And we're not asking for a handout to make it happen financially. We'll put the resources in. But what we are asking, we not be opposed when we're exercising those rights. And, we're not being threatened, had death threats or violent threats made against us, or having the coppers caught on us all the time. So that's probably our ask. And the final point associated with that is, there's, the previous speakers have talked about moving forward on this and how we can improve things. Well, the ETU will put its hand in its pocket and we'll put people on the ground, and we'll make the effort to deliver that at any time the BWI or the ITUC ask for our help. But we'll commit ourselves to the process. I'm more than happy to keep working with Bruce and the ADB to deliver this thing. We're happy to put things in place as a policy matter. MOUs are great, but we have to deliver them on the ground, and we have to resource those people to deliver them on the ground. So with that, thank you, Linnea.
Thank you very much. And I think you picked up on a lot of important points. Of course, we knew that. But one that might be forgotten is this a best practice about the apprenticeships, because we talk about we're going to need skilled labor. So how do we do that also within the projects we're actually doing, so that we can utilize and get dual benefits, not just an infrastructure, but also skilled workforce. And then also, I think it's important to hear, like, there's issues even in Australia where the frameworks are there. So how severe things can be if the frameworks are not there, not the protective governments, institutions, etc. And lastly, I really like, and I often mention this with our communication with funders, clients, all of it, they maybe can do one inspection per year. If it's a really inspection, okay. But the only one that's on the site every day is the worker. That's the one that can see, and that's the one that actually, if they have the right to be unionized, can actually have the strength and be the eyes and ears also for the financiers to de-risk a project. And I think that's something we really need to establish. I just want to give you the floor really quickly again and then I'm coming back to Francis. So we're going through the whole list. Just apart from the apprenticeships, can you give some other best practices from Australia that could maybe be adapted across Asia Pacific? But because you have a key position there.
Yeah, thanks, Linnea. Without being too prescriptive, these things have to be done by agreement. The agreement has to be enforceable, and there needs to be penalties to encourage the parties to maintain agreement, both us and who we make agreements with. Unions have to have credibility. What we say we do, and what we do we say. And that hasn't always been the case. So we need to maintain our credibility with both our members, prospective members, and the people we have agreements with. That's fundamentally, as a principle, we need to establish that and maintain that. What we can't tolerate is people undermining that, and that does happen both internally and externally. So that's very important. So if we can establish agreements based on integrity and a level of trust and a recognition of everybody's right to be at the table, we can then move forward and have arrangements in place like we do in Australia for minimum numbers of apprentices on a project, minimum supervision levels. I mean, there's a number of agreements we've got where we prefer one apprentice per 4 tradespeople, and we think that's a reasonable ratio to have. Now, I don't want to be too prescriptive here. I don't think that's necessary, but there needs to be ratios on the apprentices being trained or the trainees to ensure a couple of things. One is that they are adequately protected and they're adequately learning. So having fixed ratios is important. Obviously, there's be caveats on that, and there's get-out clauses available, but we need to be looking at those sort of things. Equally with women, bringing women into the workforce, into these trade areas, there's cultural issues there. I get that, but we can't do that in Australia. We cannot deliver the energy transition in Australia, 85,000 extra electrical tradespeople by 2050, unless 50% of the workforce is part of that solution. So women also need the particular protections as well. As far as best practices go, yeah, that ratio thing works. Ensuring that, as I said, there are qualifications that people come out with, full qualifications at the end of it, not half qualifications, and ensuring that people who are brought on the job actually have those qualifications and can do that work competently, and having the support during the process to deliver that training and complete that training and ensure that they can work adequately and competently. The second point you raised, Linnea, is our solution for enforceability in a lot of places is what we call WHS reps, the Australian WHS or OHS or OSH, as it's said here. Regulatory regime provides for workplace representatives. Now, clearly, unless we have a rolled gold standard of agreement and recognition, those WHS reps, which come from rank and file tradespeople on the job, they are going to suffer discrimination. They're going to suffer threats of violence and actual violence as well in a lot of places. It happens in Australia now. I spend a lot of my time ensuring that doesn't occur. So having WHS reps, full-time employed WHS reps from the workforce, representing the workforce with a recognition and protection given by mutual agreement is critical in this and being able to deliver. It's fine for officials, union officials, to rock up once a year, but that doesn't really cut it. There needs to be, those officials need to be better spending their time supporting rank and file members on the job who are actually there every day delivering and protecting it. We're not going to win every argument. We're not going to be able to protect all of them all the time, but we can actually set a lot in place and move forward on this, and I suppose gain a level of consent, support, recognition into the future that these people are fundamental. It's a good thing for the employer. It's a good thing for the employer to have that relationship and to be able to deliver that safety on the job as well by supporting these people. And it's certainly a good thing for workers.
Thank you. And now back to my co-organizer, Francis. And I will start the round that will expand to all of you, so you can start thinking about this question as well if you want to add something. But Francis, how do you think the bank could build local level monitoring mechanisms with union inputs to ensure the implementation of policies like the safeguard policy?
Of course, above all, there is freedom of association and collective bargaining rights should be, for all the project workers should be observed. But I would like to highlight this stakeholder engagement plan. In terms of this stakeholder engagement plan, I would like to highlight the better understanding about the social dialogue and collective bargaining by bank should be made. And also, you may know that social dialogue or tripartite platform is well-established institution even in Asia-Pacific region. So bank can use this platform to talk with the social partners, government, employers, and workers together at the national level. Second point is about the grievance mechanism in the ESS2. It's actually identify the information to project workers representatives, and their organizations. So I believe in this term, their organization, I believe it should include all levels of trade union, including industrial union, national union, regional and international trade union organization for better resource mobilization. Because the project level trade union they have enough resource. Yeah, so the local level monitoring and implementation, it should have collaboration with all levels of trade unions. So in this regard, I give an example. With IFC, the global union has a dedicated website. So we call it a labor portal to provide the platform for trade union to make a report directly to the IFC. And also with the EBRD, there is a template, email template, and dedicated email address for trade union directly send the concern to the EBRD. So this kind of mechanism, I think, is also we can consider together with the bank to develop. The third point is the sister also mentioned about the OSH committee. In ESS4, there is a provision that the worker, they can report work situation, and if they believe the situation is not safe or healthy, they can remove themselves from the workplace, which is in line with the ILO convention. So in order to implement this provision, I think the role of the OSH committee is quite important. But unfortunately, the ESF doesn't mention the OSH committee specifically. But I do believe the guidance note will provide some information about the role of the OSH committee to implement this provision. So the final point, yes, I would like to see this implementation is So ongoing process, a living process. So I would like to see the guidance note or best practice note can be regularly discussed or consulted between bank and trade union at all level. And yes, in order to ensure the ESF is implemented consistently in all level, the partners between the bank and the trade union should be strengthened. And I would like to conclude by saying that as a regional organization, we also have a responsibility in monitoring and information sharing. So we must, ITUCAP, yes, we have a commitment to be vigilant to share information with our national affiliates about the project and about this grievance mechanism and this kind of thing, so that we can share the information among our affiliate for better understanding. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's really good points, and especially on the stakeholder management plan. And so we can often see that unions are forgotten and workers are forgotten, because when the plan is made, the project hasn't been commerced. So there's no workers on the ground yet. So that's where unions, national unions, can play a very key role, because they can represent the workforce that then later will be on the project. So I think that's really key also on how to develop these, because otherwise workers' issues often are forgotten when you do the plans for the project. So with that, I will do a quick round with maybe one idea on how you think implementation of safeguards towards creating a just transition could be made. So one thing that you would like to, I would like to see, and maybe I will start with Rexon. And then meanwhile, I hope everyone in the room is thinking about the question, maybe not everyone, but at least some, because we haven't received any questions on the pigeonhole thing, but that makes me happy because I rather hear from you. So we will do this quick round. If there's one thing you would think would improve implementation of policies, and then we will go to the room. Rexon.
Yes, I agree that the trade union role will be critical for year ahead, because international voluntary investment, trilateral agreement, and also the similar to ADB. So we have also now human rights due diligence, OECD guideline, the ILO. Everybody have their own safeguard. So it's not easy for the grassroots trade union, if we are not national trade union, to help them to understand what the safeguard, how the mechanism, what the best way to do that. So the trade union now is the role become more sophisticated, not in the enterprise level anymore, but already in the policy level. We have to know how to dealing with the multinational corporation who will finance what behind of these practices. And also sometimes also we have to dealing with the government who pro the capitalists then workers, because the pressure of the FDI, everything. So we of course have the good one. We have opportunity to use safeguard, at least despite difficult, but the union need to increase their capacity building, because it's not easy. Not everybody can use the mechanism, despite put all on their website, all the practical things. It's not easy, because everything have to evidence-based accusation, and then if you can do that, we have problem. Especially when you accuse company to do this, to do that, and then it's not true, the police will come to interrogate you, and then there will be another problem. So we have to be more sophisticated. Thank you.
Thank you. Francis has made many points, but do you want to do one specific one? Apart from saying freedom?
Yeah, just short one. I believe this ESF actually set up quite higher bar, considering the labor market practice in many Asian Pacific countries. So yes, ADB, you have a great responsibility to implement this ESF, but don't forget the workers are there. So you have I mean, based on the workers' fundamental workers' right, we can be partner together to make this implementation. I think that's
Great. Shagufta?
Okay, so as already I have already highlighted though, but yes, for on the paper we have the policies, of course, but the implementation is always a challenge, and for that the system of monitoring, and of course, as I mentioned previously regarding the GRC, there should be an effective mechanism that can be there in place so that the local issues can be heard and can be raised and resolved. And also regarding the OSH committee, such kind of mechanism is also required so that the labor violations are addressed.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Lene. This is really challenging. You've sort of stumped me in a way because there are so many points and everything resonates very well. In fact, I've been taking copious notes just on my phone. But if I'm going to bring it down to one, I'm going to pick up on one that Matt and others have mentioned, which is about enforcement. And in particular, I really want to highlight OSH. And I do not want to see any worker go to work and not come home. And we get these incidents, and it's absolutely heartbreaking. It impacts me, but it impacts on their family and everyone associated with them. It's an absolute obligation that workplaces are safe, whether it's a major incident of people unfortunately losing their life or other debilitating illnesses. And I think there's a major issue that we face across Asia and the Pacific. Standards are there, but they're not implemented well, and the capacity is not there. So if it was one thing that I would want to see fundamentally changed, is a greater focus on that. Thank you.
Thanks.
Probably going to come from a different direction for this one. The transition for us from the lens through which the ETU views it is generation, transmission and distribution. Generating electricity, transmitting it from where it's generated to distribution points at very, very high voltage, and then safe and adequate systems of distributing it. We've been doing this for a long time, but technology is growing so much in the industry and is making things a lot better. Security of electricity supply to the future with renewables. There is a big onus on the workers to train and to be trained. So the one fundamental point, well, there's two fundamental points. One is we need to establish principles that we all agree on and move forward from there. Once we establish principles we agree on, that they are good starting points, especially with finance, with labour and finance. But the main point I think I'd like to make, and you might find this a little weird, is that there needs to be a recognition that vocational training is the equal of academic education. There has to be a recognition that trade training is equal to university education. There's a whole range of reasons for that, apart from privilege and discretion. I'm not really talking about privilege being exercised in a negative sense, but workers who deliver the transition have to be recognised as every much as valuable as the people who are financing it and directing it. And it is clear that trade training should be recognised equally to academic training. And I think that's a good way to move forward.
Thank you very much. And we have received some questions. They're popping up. Some, I think, already been answered about, for example, what ADB can do to address union busting and basic OSH. And then I will answer one question quickly, which was if BWI, I2C, or ADB measure and report number of accidents and fatalities routinely. For I2C and BWI, we are gathering accidents and fatalities on certain projects, but we don't have, for example, for all the ADB projects, because unfortunately we don't have access to all that information. On projects we organize, and we have trade unions on the ground, we address and highlight, especially if there's a fatality. But unfortunately, that information is not fully accessible. It is best practice. It's something we also are pushing the ADB, and I'm sure that's going to be the next discussion, because, for example, EBRD is publishing all of their data on accidents and incidents. So that's a very interesting question. On just transition, we have one question on workers from traditional industries may see green transition as a threat to their livelihood and jobs. So this one is directed to Matt, but I will also ask for the Indonesian perspective here. But first, can we share some about your experience about how to address their concerns and mobilize workers on the just transition? So Matt, maybe from the Australian perspective, and then Rex.
Thanks, Lana. It's an excellent question and well directed, because I was part of the group that lobbied for and achieved the Net Zero Economy Authority in Australia, which now is an agency under the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet, and will eventually become its own statutory authority. It's also a matter of pride for us, for the ETU, because the person who is the CEO of it currently came up through the ETU as a lawyer. I think it was the first job outside of university, so we're quite proud of it, having staffed it and delivered it. It is designed especially to, for those who aren't completely familiar with Australia, the old coal centres where high voltage power was generated. Bulk power was generated, such as around Newcastle and the Hunter Valley, north of Sydney, is a particularly good example. Now, the Just Transition, the Net Zero Economy Authority, is there to aid workers as coal shuts down into alternative employment. Now, for us, in a practical sense, those skills that are deployed in coal-fired power station are largely associated with rotating machinery. And the control and instrumentation of rotating machinery. We're well down the path of beginning construction of offshore wind. Now, what does that involve? It involves instrument and control of rotating machinery that's producing electricity. It's important, and we're lucky in the Hunter Valley too, because there's particularly, not that I live in the Hunter Valley, but a mate of mine is one of the local members there. He's an ex-miner and is right on board with this, Dan Rapicoli, and to his credit, he was recently re-elected on Saturday night. But Dan's right across these things, and it's important to have the local political leadership championing these things and ensure that there is a transition, not just to renewables from fossil energy, but the workers moving from fossil energy to renewables. And because if you don't do it, and this is something we've had awful experience with in a lot of cases in the electricity industry, where it's been restructured in various parts, the level of dislocation, physical and mental and emotional dislocation in regional Australia because of various restructures and economic reform has been awful. And I don't want to go to the amount of suicides and family violence and breakups and tragic matters that have occurred because of that. So that's why the Net Zero Economy Authority is important. That's why it's important that we're not just transitioning to a new type of energy, but we're transitioning workers with it and their families.
Thank you. And Rexon, you also mentioned the coal industry. And
yeah, I did. So that's why there is the platform we call Just Transition. So we have to translate what the meaning of Just Transition. For instance, one day our recommendation, 5 years before they phase out coal, they have to announce. So there is the opportunity, people, workers to move or to have scenario what they better off for them, what the model of social protection or the skilling training, because not all of them will be want to from the coal mining in the jungle. And then suddenly they said, okay, we will get a new job in the hotel in the city. No, not everybody like that kind of the shifting. So this the Just Transition should be translate what the step what the negotiation, what the scheme to be offered to the workers, or what the scheme to the local community, to indigenous people. So without that will be there is the resistance from the people if there is no scheme or what the benefit to them. But in the global scenario, the job provided by renewable energy or clean energy transition will be bigger than fossil coal industry. But we have to translate this to the local things. So there should be transparency. Where is the renewable energy will be established? How many workers to be there? Who workers to be priority to be to get the job? It should become from those who already is out industry, so that they have the automatically replacement job. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. I got a last question. Pigeonhole now, people putting up their hands. I also got 30 seconds to go. Can we take the one in the back? Maybe, or you can just hand one. And meanwhile, there was a question about COP. Who is asking that one? Was that yours?
So basically, to add on to what the gentleman said just now, and in the context of my country, India, so we have in the north of India, our coal-bearing regions, right? Primarily 4 or 5 states. And if you look at the map of renewable energy, it's not a simple overlap. Most of the renewable energy is in the south of India or in the west. And then, some hydro, though big hydro we don't consider a good option. And now some solar coming in. Therefore, if these communities and workers in the coal-bearing areas of India need to, be part of the just transition, then I think we need to think of it differently. It cannot be just, as you said, from Australia, from fossil fuels to renewables. It needs a more holistic planning, perhaps manufacturing industries that will give more jobs to these workers. Because at least in my country, there cannot be a simple translation from fossil fuel-based worker to renewable worker. That's the point I wanted to make.
Thank you very much. I'm told we need to close.
Yeah.
The last question was if ITUC and BWI has any priorities for COP. And I just want you to look at our Too Hot to Work campaign, which asks for guaranteed workers' protections, fair compensation for heat-related work stoppages, and safe workplaces. So that's somewhere you can look further. And with that, I will thank everyone for submitting questions. And we have one representative that didn't manage to take the floor. So I hope that anyone can ask him that's now standing up. And I want to thank our panelists. I think we've had a very, very fruitful panel with a lot of different perspectives. Special thanks to Bruce. And I look forward to continue our collaboration. And I'm sure that everyone on the panel will also be at your disposal to make sure that the safeguard policy is implemented throughout the region. Thank you.
Lene, can I make one plug? I know we're out of time. Just to Francis, he spoke about guidance notes and the need for union engagement on that. So I just want to update everyone. So these are going to become public the end of July, in July. At that stage, they'll go up on our website. They'll be available for public comment. And we're very keen to have a focus group around that. And as we did in the policy preparation, we'd welcome your engagement. So thank you. And thanks for the session.
Thank you. Big applaud for our panelists.